Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. My name is Ashley and I'm here with another meet and greet for our 30-day Ramadan Hijab challenge. I'm with Andrea this morning. She lives in Colorado Springs in the United States. She grew up as a member of the Girl Scouts and she eventually became the employee of multiple councils. And through this, she taught girls ages 6 to 18 about bullying and self-confidence. And she's been very passionate about women's rights and committed to creating safe spaces for girls. And even though she's never been religious, she's always loved learning about cultures and religions. So, Andrea, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm really excited to get to talk to you today. How's everything going with you?
It's good. It's been nice. Weather's been pretty nice. So.
That's good. That's good. So I'm curious, because I'm also from the US, but I've never been to Colorado. So where you live, how accessible is knowledge about Islam and hijab?
I would say where I live in particular is sort of the conservative hub of Colorado. Colorado as a state is rather liberal. Denver is a very liberal place to live. Colorado Springs is about an hour south. It's around 500,000 people, but we have a very large military presence here. So it has the Air Force Academy. We have multiple military bases here, lots of military contractors like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. So most people here are somehow connected to the military. Most people are Christian. Focus on the Family is a really big Christian organization that's very present here. Their headquarters is here. So it's a little overwhelmingly Christian at times. I went to Barnes & Noble trying to find information, trying to get a copy of the Quran. And it took me a good long while to find anything about Islam that, in this sea of books about Christianity. We have whole bookstores of just Christian books, So it's a little disappointing to me because I did grow up here, but I moved and I lived for the past 2 years in Columbus, Ohio, which has a much larger community of Muslims. There's a very large Sudanese immigrant population, especially on the east side, who are majorly Muslim. And so you see a lot more there. Like up till now, like all through Ramadan, I don't think I've seen another person in hijab.
Wow.
Anywhere.
I was curious about that.
Yeah. I know there was 2 girls in my high school that wore hijab, but I never talked to them. They weren't in my circle. I'm not even sure they were in my grade. But, honestly, like growing up, that's probably the only people I've seen. And I kind of just made a note. And, as a more liberal person in a liberal family, I guess it didn't really make a difference to me. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I'm sure they got things that weren't as pleasant from other people. So it's certainly not something that's present here.
It's really interesting. I always wonder, people always ask about the United States because there's supposed to be freedom of religion. And I'm like, well, I feel like in like northern states, it's a little bit more accepted, but then you hear about so much Islamophobia there as well. And it's just kind of up and down. And I've also been in similar situations where I've been to like a Barnes and Noble or other bookstores within the States looking for books about Islam, and there's such a tiny section, and typically you can only find some Qurans, and like you can't find any other informational books really. But the Christian section is huge. And I thought after going to, I think, 2 or 3 bookstores, I was like, I'm just not going to find anything.
Mm-hmm.
You either have to find like one of those like mom and pop stores, you know, if they're open to that idea,
Maybe
or you have to order online.
Bookstore.
Yeah.
I know, because I went into Barnes and Noble and they have their religious section,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like trying to go through it. And I'm like, I'm not really sure how this is set up. Everything is Christian, and I finally figured out that on the back side they had the other religions, but that means that they had Christianity and every other religion in the world on an equal amount of, information. And
like,
even there's still Christian stuff on the back.
Yes, yes. I feel like each other religion gets maybe like a shelf, if that. And it's very, very interesting to see, I guess.
Yeah. A little bit disappointing.
Yes, it is. It is for sure. I guess I mean, I kind of understand maybe supply and demand. They're like there's not a huge Muslim population, but then I also think, maybe people just aren't even open to that idea. That's always my fear, I think. So, did you ever see any Islamophobia? I know you haven't seen a lot of Muslims out and about, but even like whether in Ohio or Colorado, did you ever see any like altercations or anything like that?
Honestly, I haven't. I haven't dealt with anything myself so far, which I am surprised by. I guess I expected worse. And I'm not like, knock on wood, I'm not hoping to see anything, but
Right.
I was rather frightened a bit and shaken because Colorado doesn't have the best record with our country's personal issue with gun violence.
Yes.
I know I have friends who've been traumatized from being in those shootings. I have friends from the Arapahoe High School shooting. I know people from Aurora, where the movie theater was. I know our Planned Parenthood in downtown Colorado Springs had a shooting, and I went to Target one day on the day after the shooting in Boulder at the King Supers. And my sister actually lived and worked right by that King Supers. And it's not like a bad area. It's not like it was a poor, like downtrodden area. Like King Supers is also Kroger in many places. And it's not like, that's not a cheap grocery store. So it's like, it was very much in a place that I was living in. And so I heard about that, and then I went to Target, and then kind of like on my drive to Target, I was like, is this a good idea? Like, and so I definitely, that was kind of the first time that I really was going out and going shopping, and I just had nerves because I know that people have been shot here for a lot less.
Yes.
And it's like, the problem with here is you don't see it coming because it feels very peaceful and everything's very normal until it's not.
Right.
We're not a war-torn country where you're like, I expect to be unsafe. I expect there to be bombs happening and I'm ready and I'm prepared and I know these things and everybody knows how to deal with this, but nobody knows how to deal with this here because everybody says, oh, it's not going to be me. It's not going to be here because we've never done that. That's not a thing. It's not going to happen, but it can. And it does. And it comes out of nowhere. And you're like, I just wanted to go to King Soopers and get groceries. Now 3 people are dead. You know, it's crazy because we preach so many things that just are never followed through. And I find that really sad, and it's probably the thing about this country that upsets me most is there are lots of empty promises and lots of misunderstood things by the general world population and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Not understand anybody else. The ignorance in this country is remarkable and disturbing.
Yes, yes. I think whenever I started wearing hijab, honestly, I was a little worried as well. I think more so about gun violence, because it is kind of just everywhere in the US. And so I thought, now I look different. I feel like sometimes as a white woman, like I had this privilege and I wasn't as concerned. And then you look different all of a sudden, and you don't know what's going to happen. And you don't know what you're going to face. And I remember putting the hijab on for the first time for World Hijab Day. I wondered how I would just be treated, if there would be negative comments.
Right.
I'm very lucky. I'm going on almost 2 years of wearing hijab and being Muslim, and I haven't experienced anything just too crazy. And I haven't myself witnessed a whole lot of Islamophobia in the sense of like physical attacks, which is really, I think lucky, because those still happen all the time. And so whenever I asked you, have you seen some Islamophobia? And you were like, well, not really. And I'm always so glad when somebody's like, no, I haven't really seen, anything like that. So I'm always glad. Is this the first time that you've worn a hijab? This the 30-day challenge?
I did it back in February for the World Hijab Day. And then I might have done it once or twice just to try it and just to see, like, in between then and Ramadan. But generally, yeah, like this is the first time that I've really done it, because I've always found it a very interesting and appealing concept, because I studied religion some in college. It wasn't my major. I was a theater major, but even as a theater major, we do all sorts of plays, and you're doing all sorts of different things in your classes, in your projects. So you're still constantly learning about people, because you're just learning about them through sort of this fictional lens. I did take religions courses in college, and I find Islam, as somebody who's never been religious, to be the most appealing of the 3 main monotheistic religions, honestly. When I really think about what I know, and I still am not all the way through the Quran, and I have not gotten all the way through the Bible, and I haven't even touched no, don't not know the word.
The Torah?
Yeah, the Torah. So I can't say I know everything, but from my classes and my theoretical learning, I really appreciate the readings of the Quran that are very feminist, because you have to think about these things historically and not modernly. Like, I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding the difference between, this is what they're telling me now versus this is what they said, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago. And, at the time, it was very progressive. It was the most progressive of the 3. It was the place that women, I think, had the most power and were most understood. And the hijab was part of that. It was part of giving power back to the women to like, I have the power to let people see me, versus, a lot of the Christian writings are very possessive. They feel very like, it made me reading some of the same passages about the same sort of things, because the Bible, the Christian Bible, does also ask for head coverings for women, which a lot of people refuse to believe or don't want to talk about. But reading like that same passage in the two different books, it's very possessive in Christianity, and it's hard. I have a hard time really understanding what they mean, because I'm gonna kind of butcher this because I'm gonna paraphrase. But they're saying like the head of the man is God and must be uncovered, but then the head of the woman is man, and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, and then therefore must be covered because it is a shame and you're covering your shame. And I'm like, why is my head a shame? And why does it belong to a man? So that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I'd love to talk to someone who's more adept and knows more about Christianity and their reading of the Bible, and see if they can explain that to me. But, in flat out words, the Quran puts it out in no uncertain words that, the hijab is there for protection and modesty and to keep you from being abused sexually or seen as an object. And that is, I mean, how could I not be behind that sentiment when my other option is to be the possession of a man, when that's what I was born into. I think I was baptized. I believe I was baptized Presbyterian, but that was, it's one of those things that people just do because at this point, so many of the people in our country are Christian just because they are, because everybody, because we always have been, and nobody goes to church. Nobody knows what that means. It just means you get to have Christmas, and I don't actually really care. And so, like, I've never been to church. I went to vacation Bible school as a kid. Don't remember anything. I think a lot of us just do it because it's what you do, and that's certainly not a reason to do anything, really.
I feel like a lot of times in even like high schools in the US, you're not really taught about various religions. They might gloss over some things. And so World Hijab Day does have a new initiative. We're declaring May, I guess you could say, as International Muslim History Month, highlighting the things that we have in the world because of Muslims. Not necessarily just like Islam itself, but also like the people, And so we're hoping that will lead to education in schools more because, like you said, you took classes in college. And so I am curious, in those classes, now, was it geared toward multiple religions or one? And did they ever have speakers come who are part of those religions to talk? That's what I want to know.
We had units. Mm-hmm. So we had this big long course that had different units. We did not have any speakers. That would have been a very interesting and probably a nice thing to do. My main learning was this big long course, and then it was split up. So we would do units. We would do like a unit of Christianity, a unit of Judaism, a unit of Islam, and then we did Hinduism and Buddhism. And then I furthered my studies in Buddhism. That is actually the religion that I know the most about. I actually went to Japan and I studied Buddhism. I did a study abroad of Buddhist studies in Japan. But back to like the Abrahamic religions, I think they were really given each the same amount of time and effort. The thing is, I got an A in Islam and Judaism, but I actually got a C in Christianity.
Oh, wow.
Because the thing about Christianity is living in a Christian country, which is what we are. I'm not going to pretend we're not, because we like to pretend we're not, but we are. The Pledge of Allegiance has God in it, and we all know which one it is. So, we learned things, and I knew things, but they weren't necessarily correct things. So, like, I had to unlearn Christianity in this class to relearn it, which was much more difficult than, starting fresh, where I didn't know anything about these other religions other than they were sort of connected to Christianity. And, I know the story of Moses because I love the Prince of Egypt. But, like, I had to unlearn all of these things that I kind of knew secondhand, because you just are in it all the time.
That's understandable. Yeah, I definitely understand that. I was just curious about the speakers because I used to work at a university, and they would I knew that they invited the imam from our masjid to go speak to a class about Islam on campus. And so I was like, I wonder how many schools invite someone who actually are part of that religion. So I wish that they would have done that for you guys. I think that would have been really helpful.
I don't want to slander my school or anything, and I don't want to slander the state, because there are wonderful people there. But I went to school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and Nebraska is a very rural, Republican, very white state. I know that there is a Muslim community there. There were mosques. I do wish that they had maybe brought in more people that we could have heard directly rather than just theoretically through all of our books. But I could also see the university not asking people and not going out of their way to include that.
That is unfortunate. So my next question is, how do you feel wearing the hijab?
Externally, I still have those nerves of, being afraid of Islamophobia, because it's something that isn't present all the time. Not really present until it is. And when it is big. So, you kind of feel like you're basically wearing a ticking time bomb that you have no idea where the timer is because somebody else has it. And that's a little nerve-wracking. But, as a woman, I've still always been more nervous going out by myself anywhere, because we kind of have that culture too of, like, you're a woman, you're not really safe because you're an object to be possessed, that there are people out there that will just take you. So it's not an unfamiliar feeling, it's just a little bit heightened. I do feel more comfortable going out with a man, even more than just another girl. I got to go to a lot of places this weekend with my friend Matt, and that made me feel a lot safer, going out in hijab with a man. That way, like, people would be less likely to do anything. Internally, I think it's interesting and it's nice, because I've kind of had issues with my hair in childhood. I didn't like it. I have a very round face. I didn't like it long. I didn't like it, like, I didn't want to cut it too short as a little kid. My mom didn't want me to cut it short because that wasn't a thing you did 20 years ago. You know, little kids didn't have short hair. Pixie cuts weren't really a thing. And I do have a pixie cut, you know, obviously you can't see, but I have very short hair. I have a very short pixie cut that I adopted about my freshman year of high school. And that was, you know, that's a big thing to do in a conservative place back in 2010, 9, 10. So, you know, girls didn't have short hair. Teenage girls didn't have short hair. And so doing that was a big statement, and a statement that came with a lot of assumptions and labels. Everybody thought I was a lesbian. They're like, short-haired girls are lesbians, you know, short-haired girls are this, you know, you have to be a tomboy, you have to be a lesbian, you have to be all these things just because you cut your hair short. And you know, it's like that. There's just so much about hair in every culture. You know, hair's always been important. And it's odd, and I'm not sure why, but it's always been a matter of contention, you know, and covering it is somewhat freeing because you don't have to worry about those labels that are given to you because you're blonde and you're an idiot, or you're ginger and you have no soul. You know, now you know, it's an equalizer, which is the same sort of idea with uniforms, you know, and school uniforms and things like that. But when you're doing one of those things, I think it only works if it's not mandatory. It has to be a choice. Because if you're choosing to hide yourself, you know, you have reasons for it. Versus if everyone was forced to cover, then that's just, you know, that's just oppressing how you feel versus allowing you to be free from it. Adding another layer of oppression. So even if you have the best intentions at heart, you're like, no, 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 women, this will be great. This will help you be seen as a woman, and people will stop objectifying you. If I'm not on board with that, then that's still exactly what you're doing. You're doing what to do. So I'm not going to defend the hijab in every situation, because there are places in the world that women are being forced to do it, and it might not be what they want. And it's a thing that comes and goes with history and time and cultures, where like even within the same country, you know, there are waves of, you know, the thing to do is to wear the hijab. And then you have the counterculture where they're like, we're always forced to cover up. I don't want to do that anymore. And you get that freedom of not wearing it. But then everybody's like, oh, I'm being objectified. I want to wear hijab again. And then the freedom comes from that. So it's historically always been this roller coaster of wanting to wear it or not wanting to wear it. But I think the key is it has to be a choice. It can't be mandatory. So I think it's a great thing to do if it makes you feel comfortable, if it makes you feel free, if it makes you feel glad that, you know, you're showing outwardly. Just like Christians love to wear things with crosses. You know, you have your rosaries and your cross. Like, it's the same thing. If you want to wear this to represent yourself and a part of yourself, that's great. You can't make it mandatory, but you also shouldn't keep anybody from doing it. You shouldn't stop people.
It should definitely be a choice. I agree. I'm glad that you mentioned that you've gone out in your hijab with a friend. So tell me, how do, you know, friends and family feel about you wearing it? You said you come from a pretty, I guess, open-minded family, a very like liberal family. So have they seen you in hijab?
My family has. My family has been really supportive. I think they were a little bit questioning at first, just a little bit like confused.
Mhm.
Maybe like before I really explained it, they're just like, oh, she's just being silly. I don't know what she's doing. But once like, I got more serious about it, I started planning out what I was going to do. I started planning for Ramadan, planning my Instagram posts. I'll be putting out another one today. I'm trying to do kind of one a week of like my journey, as well as information generally about Islam and about hijab, so that way more people can have, I'm spreading more awareness, and anyone's welcome to comment on those, and I love to have discussion, especially if I'm wrong about something, which is totally, that can happen. But generally, I've had positive feedback from the people I know. Nobody I know has come to be with anything negative. And it's been, the people closest to me are always like the first people I see that are like your post or like whatever. So I'm happy to have seen that. I don't necessarily know about my extended family. I'm not the closest with them. And I know that there are some people in my family that are more conservative, and I don't know what they think about it. And I haven't reached out, and I probably won't, because honestly, I don't care, because it's my choice. And I'm choosing to do this to support the girls that need it, because it's just not acceptable anymore in this country to be doing this to people. We're just
Right.
bigger than that. We're bigger than that. Our whole dogma of our culture is surrounding freedom, and religious freedom specifically. That was the purpose of our country. It was the whole purpose of coming here, was people were trying to get away from overarching religions like Catholicism, that were coming in and killing people. So freedom of religion was the basic cornerstone of this country. And the fact that we only have freedom of Christian religion is just not fair. That's not how it was intended to be. That's not how it should be. And we need to stop doing it.
I agree. And I like that you keep using the word choice when it comes to hijab. I think that's so important. So since you're taking the 30-day challenge and everything, can you tell everyone why you think it's important that, I guess, non-Muslims take part in our two challenges, either the Fast for Unity or the Hijab 30 challenge?
I think Hijab 30 is great, especially for non-Muslims, because it's just not seen here. And anything that isn't seen isn't understood. And you can just ignore it because it's not in front of you. It's this thing that's happening over there, and we don't have to worry about that. Like, those Muslims over in wherever, like, we don't have that here. We don't have to worry about that here. But just because someone's not wearing hijab, it isn't going to make them not Muslim anymore. They're still here. And I think seeing it and being presented with it more will make people realize just how many people are here. Because honestly, it would be easy to say there are no Muslims in Colorado Springs, because that's what it looks like. And I'm sure that is not true. Out of 500,000 people, there's not one person. So it's not like they aren't here. We just don't see them. And so the more that you can see, the more it becomes normal, especially to kids. And that's the best way to move forward, is through newer, younger generations. Because honestly, I think acceptance and open-mindedness and change is something that will happen. I think it's much more likely that a child from a conservative home will grow up to have liberal beliefs than it is for a liberal home child to grow up and become conservative and become, closed-minded. So I think we really need that visual image here to show that it's an issue here. We love to ignore issues that are not in front of our face.
Yes.
And it's easy to be like, oh, this is an issue over there in the Middle East, especially since we enjoy meddling in that issue over there in the Middle East. And so it's been really bad because they really went after it, especially after 9/11, as they are the bad guys. That this whole area of the world are the bad guys. And I think that's a lot of why Syrian refugees had such a hard time finding places to go, because they're part of the bad guys. We love to see the world in black and white. We love to paint labels and say, like, we're the best, we're doing good things out there, and we're fighting the bad guys. We're fighting terror, the war on terror. What does that even mean? That's not a tangible thing you can fight. So what are we fighting? Who are we fighting? And the answer for a lot of people is, I don't really know. We're fighting the Muslims. But that's not true. ISIS is not the Muslims, just as much as the, what's the Baptist church that everybody likes to joke about is all of Christianity, there are extremists everywhere. There are extreme Buddhists setting themselves on fire in Tibet. Nobody thinks about Buddhism as a violent, religion or a violent culture, but that doesn't mean they don't have their own extremisms.
Oh, excuse me.
That's fine. To deny an entire religion just because there's a very loud extremist sect right now is not only ignorant, but extremely dangerous. And it's completely unfair.
That is very true. Solidarity is so important. So we really appreciate you taking the 30-day hijab challenge, and I really hope that it continues to go well for you, for sure. So thank you so much for joining me this morning. I don't want to keep you too long. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who joined us this morning. We've had people on Facebook and YouTube. I've seen you guys' messages coming in. So thank you guys so much. I wanted to remind everybody who's not already following us to make sure you follow World Hijab Day on Instagram, like us on Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. You can follow us on Twitter. And World Hijab Day also has a new initiative. We also have an Instagram. For that, you can find details on Facebook and our website, worldhijabday.com. And that's going to be International Muslim History Month. And that's coming in May. And we've already started putting information out. So if you can check that out. Andrea, that might be something that you're interested in too. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. It was great. It's an honor, really. Thank you.
It was an honor for us. Thank you so much. All right. And to everybody out there watching, we'll see you next time.